Let's go.
Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Before I introduce you to our guest, here is a quote just for this episode. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Friedrich Nietzsche. Our guest today, a high flyer, back again. Chapter 5 of the hit book bestseller, High Selling is a Drug. Our friend of the Culture Matters podcast, the one and only founder of 2020 Vision for Success Coaching, Christine Beckwith. Thanks for coming back. Today we're talking about upper limits, chapter 5. I want to get into the nitty gritty. I like the tracks that you break down in this chapter. Thanks for coming back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
What's an upper limit?
Yeah, so I kind of stole this term and I quoted in the chapter from Gay Hendricks. Gay Hendricks wrote a book called The Genius Zone. Um and over the years I have referenced this book, The Genius Zone, and Gay Hendricks' writing. There's a chapter inside the book called The Upper Limits. Um and it's really essentially about what do we do when we finally reach our mountaintop? Because success, excellence is very hard to sustain. Um, and often that's kind of where, the warrior that's fought to get there begins to rest. Ask any professional athlete, any Super Bowl winner, any gold medalist, what it's like to repeat. Like it looks so easy, like when we're watching the Olympics every 4 years and you see that guy that was the, swimming gold medalist or track gold medalist or whatever it is. And now they're, the contender. You have fresh people that are there with their excellence, their mountaintops have been reached. You're looking at a bunch of goats that are competing at a very high level, make it look easy to an audience of amateurs when it's extremely rare, exceptional, difficult. But to win again against fresh, competition. The thing about when you get to a winning spot is that you're tired, you've done more than anybody else to get there, and people are going to come for you. And in everything we do, there's competition. And this book, end to end, is going to talk about competition. It's going to talk about how you win. It's going to talk about what it takes to become the winner. And now in this chapter, I felt like the sustaining of the winning was an important part of high performance, I want to get people to get to their highest level, but I want them to understand that there's a price tag that comes with getting there and keeping it there. And I won't go on and on, but I draw from a real life experience of a quest to win and then the sustaining of that winning. And it's when I go back through my memory with this one team of 125 loan originators, a well-known story to you and in many of my books, the last place district that I took over, I can tell you in the day to day in that middle place where they were going from last. And we didn't even know where we were going. We just knew we wanted to be better every single day and we wanted to be better every single month and we wanted to rise through the ranks. We were competing on a national stage in a real competition that was being measured and published monthly, called the Circle of Excellence for H&R Blocks, Mortgage Division, National Division. And we in no way, shape, or form thought we were even a contender in this race because we had only started as a team with me leading them probably about 3 months before the competition started. Competition was a year long. So we basically had 15 months to the finish line, starting from the last place. But I'm going to tell you something. When these guys got to the middle, when they became average, and let me tell you something. If you're on a losing team, and for whatever reason you're losing, which I shared what I figured out by sitting with every single member and one-on-one, and then looking at the trends of what was said, and then coming up with three things that I thought defined why they were losing, and then turning those on its head. Getting to average was a huge, huge accomplishment. You would some people would argue just no longer being in the bottom and now being average was their mountaintop. It was at that point in the middle that these guys, they had worked harder, they had changed the way they worked, they had changed habits, they were working as a team. And the three things, by the way, were they had no plan, their morale was low, um, and they did not have good leadership. And so they didn't have a vision. They didn't have motivation. They didn't have someone measuring, rewarding, and all those things. And so, excuse me, I'm going to tell you that um, when we got to the middle, and I was doing like the locker room speeches monthly in the district meetings, and I was putting the numbers up every single month, and I was super excited to show this that they had made it to the middle of the pack of 14 districts, and they were excited. And they'd already come like a really long way. And at that point, I said, I want to talk to you about real competition now. Like what you guys have done, as tired as you are, like to get to this point, is to level up to a work pace that makes you average. You guys have now redefined yourself. You're not losers. You figured it out. You've got the strategy. You have momentum. You know what you're capable of. Now I want to talk to you about momentum. When the ball gets rolling, it gets easier. Like when a jogger starts running or you're lifting weights. Unless you go slow and create resistance, there's momentum. And that momentum will lessen the weight, the effects of the weight. That's just scientific. If you're rocking a dumbbell and you swing it harder, faster. So my question to you is, can we go harder and faster? Can we take the momentum we have and propel ourselves into the top? What does that look like? And I unpacked that it was going to take probably a greater focus, maybe longer hours, just a no quit focus. I asked them how much they wanted it. Like, did they think they could compete? We had 9 months left at that point. And I'm going to tell you, these guys were on their feet. And they, at that point, started to carry me because I could see that they could taste just the comeback. Like, if you've ever followed any comeback story. And as the days rolled on, I'll finish with this. I always was the first at my desk. And back then I sat in a corner office with glass walls overlooking a huge space, like 2,000 square feet, that had short mid-waist cubicles where 200 people sat on the floor, 80 operations people, 125 loan originators, 8 branch managers, team leaders, we called them. And I could see the pit, as you called it. And it was like Wall Street because when the phone started, we had focused phone calling at 4 p.m. If you walked out in the middle of that, it was palpable. Phones ringing, people talking, the buzz was like electrifying. And they were feeding off of each other's, uh, actual work. If they got a loan submitted, we had cowbells and police sirens on the floor, and they'd walk up to the nearest one in their aisle and they'd flip it on like a bartender that just got a tip. And everyone would stand up and applaud and then sit back down. Like it was
Wow.
nuts. It was like the heyday of, um, in my mind, my career of being like in the sales pit. And so everybody knows the story that they would go on to unseat the 5 year number one district within like only 30 days of the final win and soar across the finish line as the number one victors. And I've got to tell you, it was emotional. Um, it was probably life changing. I'm still talking about it. And in the book, there's another chapter called No One Hit Wonder because I need everybody to know, yes, I draw upon my victories, but my victories have not been singular. This is one of the victories. I had previous victories to this for myself, and I had bigger victories later for bigger companies and bigger things, um, and bigger groups and bigger teams. And But this victory was different for me because it was such a long haul. Now we sustained that winning. We became number one and we held it there for 3 years. And in this book, I talk about the sustaining of the mindset of sustenance when you get to that place.
No plan, low morale, no measurement, no reward. Is that the formula for low selling? Selling is a bore. Selling is hell. Selling is
I think that you have to go in and assess the cancer when you see losing situations, whether that's with an individual or a team. I sat through one-on-ones. One, I wanted each of them to feel heard. Number two, I didn't know what was making them lose or be the losers. And as they all told their personal stories, I was able to strip away. I set the tone for the meetings. I asked them to not come in and bitch about each other. I told them I didn't want to hear petty complaints. I didn't want to hear about their personal excuses. I didn't want them to come to me with problems, but rather solutions. I wanted to understand what they thought was keeping them from excelling. And so the language changed before the meeting started because I set that stage. Like, I didn't want to spend a lot of time with people like hearing their personal woes. And that might have sounded impersonal, but it was my first display as their coach of saying, look, we're an athletic team of sales sportsmanship. I'm looking for performance out of you, and we're going to keep the conversation in the realm of why am I unable to do my job at my very best? I did want to get to know them and I would get to know them, but I didn't want those initial meetings to be riddled with that. And quite frankly, some still came in and started talking about their home life and whatever, and I would stop them. And I'd say, look, I have 125 of these to get through. You have your 30 minutes. If you spend 20 minutes telling me that you and your wife aren't getting along, I'm not going to figure out why you're broken. If you're telling me this is the reason, I'm going to tell you it's not. It's the reason you're allowing yourself to not perform well. What I want to
mm,
know, given all of the tools that you have, is why you're not performing. Your personal life, like I literally, there is a chapter we just did called Thin Treads. And, um, in the beginning of this chapter, I write, do you mind if I read something?
please.
I write, I am tired. I have felt tired for a long time. I wonder if I was depressed. Understandable, if so, as I journeyed through the deepest grief I've experienced with the loss of my sister. For years, I held my breath as we cared for her declining life through to her ultimate death. Along with my parents, I found her on the floor of her apartment. All of us were traumatized, despite our expectations and foreknowledge of this scenario playing out. She battled severe health issues on multiple levels for years, brought on by an attempted suicide. Watching her fall into depression and stay there for years was hard enough. Helping her navigate and conquer the dire, dark depth and rise past it proved more challenging. My sister and I were deeply connected, and I witnessed her disintegration before my eyes. Her situation taxed my empathy daily. I felt heavy and too often at a loss to know how to help. I thought of her and what she was going through continually. She did irreparable damage to herself with the suicide attempt. The toxicity of the overdose damaged vital organs. My sister had to fight the demons of depression and her own body. It was a battle, a daunting fight the whole family enjoined. She spent her final years being treated by an organ specialist. In the end, she joined fully in the fight for her life as she finally moved into a place she wanted to live. Even this part of the journey was painful. As our hope rose and her mindset changed, it became clear her health could not be regained. She did amazing things during this time. She quit smoking and changed her diet, cured her own diabetes, but to no avail. It was congestive heart failure that took her from us. In the final month of her life, she was rushed to emergency 6 times by ambulance for heart failure. Some of those calls came in the middle of the night, during work nights, waking me up to hospital calls as we rushed to her side. Throughout this period, she came to accept her plight and spoke of her impending end. All of it was heartbreaking and soul crushing. But I learned to navigate my daily life, stand up to my responsibilities. Throughout this, despite ultimately meeting her to her end, through all of this, I learned how strong I could be, even though I felt crushed and weak walking through life in a daze. The personal cost and ultimate pain of her loss was and is major, a challenge to navigate and save myself from spiraling into my own dark place. Pile this on to a massive change in the mortgage industry, surrounded by daily people searching for their business survival. The blows to my psyche were significant. My world was heavy, difficult to navigate, and torturous for years. Work proved to be a necessary distraction from my strife and grief. I dove into the complexity of the struggling market, which gave light in my darkness, allowing me to help others save their businesses. It felt purposeful, and while it didn't replace the purposeful space my sister previously held, my work filled a void and helped me ultimately regain my footing. Work has saved me more than once from my own grief and despair. And so I say that because I had ultimate excuses to not do well at work. And maybe I'm different than everybody
No,
else.
I think that's a great point. I
Yeah,
think there are people that use that to create empires and monuments are built around them, and then there are people that are overcome by that, and that the you know the the graveyard is full of their dreams, wishes, and aspirations. We all have suffering. I think that's your point.
it is.
I think
It
that's
is.
something our audience should really listen to and think about deeply is how selfish is it of us to not to let that take away from the whole group because all of us are suffering.
Yeah. I went through my divorce, the year following that victory that I described. Not my divorce, but my separation at that time. And I ultimately would go on to close that company and have to take a team over to Safe Haven in Boston to a small boutique, like tumble down the mountain, lose my big title, my big paycheck, um, start over essentially, just kind of like sit on the shore of the mortgage industry during the implosion the initial year, '07, and just, try to, the hardest thing you'll ever do. And I talk about it in this book as well is give faith, and we'll get to that chapter, but give faith when you lack, where are we going? Leading is easy when times are good because you're a cheerleader. You're just fanning the flames of something. But when you're sitting in those moments of like despair with everybody suffering and taking on water on their boats, and your feet are wet and you're cold and you can't see where the boat is going, but you're still the leader to convince other people of their survival, their need to focus, their need to have blind faith that we will get through this. When you are scared and tired, and it is, it will draw upon the core of who you are as a leader. And I, in this book, share so many times that I was in that spot. I talk about the morning in March 2020 when the companies knew and we are now in lockdown for COVID. And I cried at my bathroom sink. I write about it in this book. And I say, will my company survive? I'm thinking, my child and I are locked into this house. Like, what the hell is going on right now in the world? It's scary. And I'd say that for me, I had a virtual company, and suddenly that day on that Zoom, it was more well attended than it ever had been. And everybody was locked into their houses, and we were all on video. And I realized my company would be the beacon of light to connect all of these people in lockdown. And for that year, we met in those rooms. We came onto the cameras from our scary homes, our scary situations, our kids locked down from school. I cried that morning because I felt the heaviness of what was going on. I myself felt hurt, scared, all of those things. And then I wiped my tears away and I went and I said, do what God gave you the gift to do. Get on that microphone and point in a direction these people can put their light. And so I think my whole life, I'm not sitting here saying I'm a great leader, do what I did. I'm saying I'm a human being. I've been through all the shit you guys are going through, but I'm a freaking high performer. And the reason I'm a high performer is I am tenacious in the pocket of work. I'll put my work ethic up against anybody. I drive from one place. My GPS is pretty solid. I'm not going to fight with you to fight with you. I'm not going to debate you to win a debate. I know a lot of people that love the argument. I'm not that person. However, I'm not afraid to debate if I feel strongly in the principle of where I'm going. I didn't always have the conviction of my experience. Jagger the other day, the morning of the election, without getting political, I love my son. I don't talk about him often enough, but I'm going to use him in this example because it made me beam with pride. Um, he was sitting at the kitchen counter, and as was Corey and myself. And we were talking about, Jagger's very politically educated, always has been. His father is, I am. So naturally for all of the years, well, he got to vote. He got to vote that morning. And he was so excited. I mean, it was like Christmas Day for him. He was like in a countdown, like, I need my passport. I got to register to vote. He was just so excited that he was doing like his civil duty and he was old enough as an adult to do it. And we had said, it's your decision. Don't let us influence you. Get educated. Watch the debates. He watched every one of the debates. He watched every one of the conferences, both. And I gave it to him because I didn't watch the party I didn't love their conference as much as I did the one I did love. And he didn't. He sat through and I was like, what are you doing? He goes, I just need to know. I need to know what everything stands for. So we were talking about the demographics of young voters and how important it was to the incoming president, either one of them, to get, the young voters vote. And without giving away the conversation and who said what, it was said that, you know, obviously President Trump, President-elect Trump went on Joe Rogan's podcast and that, that might have swayed some of the young voters because it's hip and cool or whatever. And Jagger defended that. He said, that's not why I'm voting. And if people tell you young people tell you that, he goes, there's so much more depth. These were his words. There's so much more depth to this. He said, it's not only that uh, they listened, that he went on Joe Rogan, it's that he went on Joe Rogan for 2.5 hours. It's that he was willing to be outside of his natural habitat, that he was also willing to um, answer real questions that he didn't know what was going to be asked in a flow of natural conversation.
Mm.
And he kind of defended like the young voters thing. And then he said this, I'm an uneducated voter. And I said, why do you say that? And he said, because I lack history. I lack understanding the past. He goes, I can go back and learn it, but I can't live it. He says, so I don't know what, 4 presidents ago, what that day-to-day campaign looked like. I didn't sit that night and watch how that outcome was. And because of it, I can only vote based on exactly what I know right now. He goes, so in some ways, I'm naive, but I'm voting on the ticket that's here right now. It was really, really profound to me. Because that example I draw off of with everything. I've never been afraid of the young guy that came on the sales team and showed this greenback type of vigor. I would see the veterans look at the young guy who would be running at the wall and smashing his head into the wall, where the old guy was like tired and said, yeah, I've hit that wall 10 times. I'm not doing that. But you know what happens with naive and lack of experience sometimes in performance is people will throttle the car, not realizing it could break. They don't have that history of the car accident. They don't have that fear that stops them. And sometimes they get over the wall when the veteran is sure that it can't be done. And so what I've been doing in building performance is, and in that team, that district team, I hired 25 really well vetted, high producing rookie loan originators. And I planted them on that floor amongst, I dispersed them to the 8 teams so that on every team there was 1 or 2 new guys. Guys that were getting in early, guys that were staying late, guys that were hungry for the money, sitting amongst veterans that were like watching them going, all right, you young whatever. And so I talk in this book about your bench. You've got to have fresh meat. Like I won't let my staff get old here at 2020. I'm constantly bringing in new talent because I that guy's running harder at the wall and it makes everybody around them kind of like take notice that they're sitting still. If that makes sense, if any
Mm.
of this makes sense what I'm saying.
Well, the one in the beginning of the chapter you talk, and then closing, I want your answer
Yeah.
on this. The beginning of the chapter you talked about if selling is not almost natural, intuitive, or a part of your habit, your behaviors without thought, it should be intentional 50% of your day. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that you have to be able to have a pocket of money-making tasks where your focus is driven towards the things that gives you the ROI. So many times as salespeople, we are not spending the bulk of our time focused on sales. So there's a tactical part. And by the way, we talk a lot about mindset in this book and things, but I'm telling you, this book is full, full, full of tactical matter. Um, in here, in the upper limits, I say climbing to the upper level of your sales career takes the following tactics. 1, results with a mindset to exploit. 2, obsessive focus on selling. 3, leading hard with class without crass. Sustainability through sticking power and grit to correct. And I unpack all of those things in this chapter. I don't think I think there are people out there that are winning off of natural skills with good work ethic. But I am trying to take that natural guy who shows the ability to get to the top of the mountain, that natural hiker that's packed his backpack, who is somewhat athletic and he has the map and he has a lot of really good innate skills. My job is to come in as an expert mountain climber in this analogy and get him to the top of that mountain faster, harder, reserving energy, and then being able to sustain himself at the top of that mountain. And that looks like expertise. It looks like showing him where not to climb, where he's going to get stuck expending energy, where the pitfalls are, and also what he should expect from his competition if he's really trying to win. So I loved writing this book. Man, it was well timed because writing a book in a down market about high performance drew to the top of my mind. I have rearranged everything at 2020. We're going into 2025 with new programs, a new focus, new coaches, new requirements. I'm not afraid to tell you I've changed some of my comp packages even internally to be variable so that people are incented to grow membership. And I am every bit as ever I have ever been in the cockpit of pushing 2020 vision to the high performance level because of my own
I
tactics.
can give you testimony. We were chapter 3. What's chapter 3 called? I got it
Addicted.
right here.
Yeah.
Addicted.
Yeah.
And I had an epiphany. Like, there is no reason why I can't do 1,000 podcasts in 2025. It's the 16th of November, and this is number 46 of November. That's the fruit of your
Yeah.
book. I was
Thank you.
interviewing you about chapter 3, and I had the revelation that my intuition is correct and that I'm going to push it because that's what I know I need to do.
I love that.
And since
And I'm
that, my
glad you
voice,
have that.
I can hear I'm practicing my throat, like with the monologue, because it's not just
Yeah.
interviews, right? There'll be
Yeah.
about 400 interviews in 25, but probably 600, 550, 500, 600. We'll see how it distributes, but of me sharing culture content, 30 days of thought, the CEO manual, which is huge to market. And it's been exhilarating, high, fun, challenging. Got up, I've been getting up earlier, and I already get up early to make sure that's done before the day's work starts. And it's just an example of, I think your testimony in your book and the message you're trying to get out, we're all selling one way or another in whatever medium that is for everyone that's listening. And I
Yeah.
was listening to you on chapter 3, and that's when I had a revelation. So for the listeners, I'd re-listen to all the episodes and pick up the book. Hi, Selling is a Drug, and we're going to keep going through this show. And what are the fruit already? Listening is way up. I've had more epiphanies, more amazing things are happening. Energy, momentum, excitement, activity.
Yeah, I'm
That's
gonna
what can
be
happen
here.
from
I'm gonna
reading this
just say
book.
I'm gonna be here doing high is gonna be where I am for the next year. I'm gonna be on lecture stages. We're gonna bring this to market. We have all new lectures that I'll be performing. I am back, like you just said, you're doing more podcasts. You push yourself to go back to a more accelerated level. Well,
Oh,
I kicked my coaches out of the classroom and put myself back in the seat starting in January. I'll be driving 4 high performance classes that I haven't been in the seat of. Um, I'm making myself available to people that are going to come here where they're going to get more of me, kind of going back to the core of what started 2020 and grew it. And so this is where you're going to find me. If you follow me on social media, you're going to be seeing me tout this. This was not an easy book to write. I'm going to tell you. This came out of me hard because I wanted it to be so good. I wanted it to have meticulous lessons. I didn't want to just skim over it, throw a bunch of words on a page, and say this was my playbook. If this was going to be my legacy, if something happens to me in a year, 10 years, or 20, this book will live past me. And I'm telling you, it is everything I know about performing high. If you read this book and you follow the tactics, you cannot help but get better at selling.
follow Christine. Leave us a review in the Culture Matters podcast. Bye. Hi. Selling is a Drug. We will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast.